Hello everyone, my name is Solar Moon Digest, and today I really want to have a deep discussion about my experiences in safe spaces and why I feel like they are kind of counteractive to what exactly we need as a society. And the first real reason I want to talk about it is because I follow a YouTuber slash content creator in general slash artist by the name of Kimi Kati. I will link all of her information in the description. And I want to talk about what Kimi Kati specifically asked, because she asked about the effects of being in a safe space and how toxic the environment was. I can honestly say that I did respond to that, and I said that a lot of times it's very toxic and restrictive, and you always have to walk on eggshells to see whoever has a talking stick doesn't get offended. And generally speaking, I can say that without a doubt, the majority of the safe spaces that I've been in weren't really necessarily all that safe. They preached things like diversity and inclusion, but as soon as you have a thought that strays a little bit farther from what is generally accepted in that group, you are no longer welcome in the safe space. And I feel that a lot of times you are not going to be able to, I guess, the word I want to say is talk. You never get the talking stick. You're not going to get the points that you would have gotten if you would have agreed with them. And I think the biggest detriment to the whole safe space thing is the idea that you have to always agree with the safe space. There is no real way to have a different thought or opinion, and there's really nothing you can do about it aside from just either shut up, conform, or get kicked out. And I am somebody who is a very firm proponent of gatekeeping. I think that gatekeeping is a positive thing, and gatekeeping actually would be better for a safe space. You know, the actually good gatekeeping, people who can have a productive, constructive discussion without kicking the people out that are going to actually have that discussion and let the stupid bullcrap get in. So let me begin. But first, let me get hydrated. The first proponent of the safe space that I really don't like is the idea that you have to be a certain way to be a part of a safe space. You know, a lot of safe spaces tend to be a part of the whole marginalized communities and a lot of minorities and people who just aren't cishet white men, unless those cishet white men are basically the allies and the whipping boys. But we don't even have to talk about that if I just mention that small part. And that small part is actually pretty detrimental, because you have no real idea of all the backgrounds of life that any minority has. And if you think just putting them all in a safe space and expecting them all to have that same viewpoint as you, you're going to be completely mistaken. And inherently, if it's a safe space to talk about oppression or something, you should not have a group of people that actually, I don't know, people that don't understand. That's what they're going for. But at the same time, people should be able to express their thoughts. Like, there are safe spaces where maybe autistic people could come in, and it's not gate kept well enough, or they could let people who have been self-diagnosed come in. Now, that's a whole can of worms I don't want to open, because I personally feel like self-advocacy is different from self-diagnosis, and I don't think self-diagnosis tends to not be valid. A lot of times, a lot of these people tend to say they're valid because, oh, that's what all the neurodivergent community says. That brings me to talk about the idea of the safe space in practice. In concept, it's good. In concept, it's about trying to bring a bunch of marginalized or oppressed people coming in for their ideas. and talk about what they want to talk about without feeling the need to censor themselves. However, in practice, said groups of marginalized people always get run over by the people who have the most power in that group. There are actual power dynamics in these groups. I have experienced this firsthand with not only being a part of an LGBTQIA plus safe space, thinking I could get support for being a lesbian, but the fact of the matter is the people with the most talking power in that group are the TQIA plus people, and the LGB people are literally shoved to the side because we got to focus on the queer part about queer incorporated, queer part about this is the group and society, instead of the actually talking about things like same-sex attraction and gender dysphoria, and the idea that all these new genders are taking precedent over actual LGBT issues, specifically LGBT issues, because there are still issues regardless of if you're trans or not that actual same-sex attracted people will have. In many countries, you'd rather be trans than be LGBT, same-sex attracted. And that's a fact. Only because a lot of times the transition comes from like homophobia. You don't understand. As well as this, I also noticed that a lot of groups that are a part of these safe spaces aren't actually safe for anyone at all. If you have a diversity of thought, if you decide to think outside of what's generally accepted, you are going to get harassed out of these spaces, you're going to get hated, you're going to get people sending you semi-threats at some points, because that's happened to me. In an autism space, safe space of that. Being autistic, I have experienced this myself. In Facebook, on a Facebook group about autistic young adults and stuff. These group, I just want to talk about being autistic, and one of the questions I have was that it was talking about the need for the current wave of intersectional feminism, if it's not actually going to be talking about women, if it's just going to be focusing on people who identify as a woman, or it's going to be focusing on like the meaningless issues that women have instead of actually helping women that need to be freed from oppression, like a wage gap. Like that's been disproven so many times, but yet here I am. Here we are still talking about this. Here we are still bashing all these people that actually talk about this stuff and say there are issues that we need to talk about that women have caused with feminism and that it causes men a lot of harm. And the actual feminist issues that we need to be talking about, you're not talking about at all. And so I remember specifically being in that group asking those questions, like why are we talking about things like the wage gap and other things, and if it were truly that bad for women in the US, at least in the US and the UK and Western countries, then we would not be wanting to be here. We would want to go somewhere else. We would want to be fighting for actual rights. And most times the rights that we're trying to fight for, we're losing actual sex-based rights for intersectionality. And if I talk about that, not specifically this time, but back when I was younger, like literally a teenager in high school, I asked that question. I would ask that question because I just wanted to hear the perspectives. My perspective was that as a woman, there are some things that I have now that men do not. I understand that there are things that men have that I do not. We are just different because we are biologically different. We are a sexually dimorphic species. Tell me why there are a bunch of older white people telling me that I'm wrong, I'm stupid. And one in particular, one really big person, yet again, older, white, autistic male, talking down to somebody who is significantly younger than him, like at least 2 or 3 decades younger than him, and is a minority, and is a female, and is also on the autism spectrum, just genuinely curious about the world because haven't seen anything different. And this guy straight up said, well, we should take your rights away. We should take your rights away, and men should start beating and raping you again. Maybe then you'll come crawling back to feminism. This 60-something-year-old man, like 50, 66, something, just significantly older than me. This is a grown-ass man who has lived at least 3 lifetimes of my own. At that time, I was like 17 or something. Telling a 17-year-old that for thinking the way that I did, for my just curiosity's sake, obviously some of those things I've understood, why I understood some people fight for, but it's still dumb. Just asking those questions are literally grounds for older men to send me hate for. And the people in the group liked his response. And I said, but I'm a minority. I thought y'all would have taken my response over his. But it's because he had the power in the group. He had the most power because he was one of the biggest, autism advocates on the platform. And it's ridiculous. It's like they have the power to harass people and to say these vile things. And I can understand why. I understand why feminists are mad at men. I understand why a lot of radical feminists are mad at a lot of men. It's because, especially left-wing men, they cannot wait to start harassing right-wing women or non-leftist type women. They will be happy to harass you. They're happy to send you rape threats and death threats. They're happy to talk down to you and be condescending. Absolutely. However, I also see it a lot worse with a lot of women, because with women, we're supposed to be this sisterhood of feminism and intersectionality. In a lot of these spaces, they could care less about me. They really could. As soon as they hear me talk, as soon as I have my opinion, they all of a sudden want me shut down. And they're always talking a big game about letting people of color talk more, letting women talk more, letting neurodivergent women talk more, letting people who are non-white talk more. But when a non-white person comes up, when a non-white woman decides to say something that they don't like, it's all of a sudden time to shut you down. You better know your place, little girl. That kind of disgusting language that I would expect to hear from a bunch of paleo-conservatives. And I barely hear that from them. The most I would hear is that I cannot be same-sex attracted. And that's the worst thing I hear from those people. And I noticed that a lot of the places that are supposedly unsafe for me, the Republican spaces or the libertarian spaces that a lot of people are expecting to have more toxic white men in the group, these toxic men are some of the nicest people I've met. I'm actually friends with quite a bit of people who do not think exactly like me. They're a lot more right-wing than I am, and they're some of the nicest people. And I meet a lot of left-wing people, and I realize, damn, you guys are, mentally insane. That is, insanity you're talking about. And I noticed this in these safe spaces, and these safe spaces, you only get an echo chamber. You're never really allowed to dissent from them. You're constantly walking on eggshells, and that is basically abuse tactics. You cannot voice your opinion. You'll be gaslit into thinking in their words, in their world, in their terms. And if you don't think that way, they're going to punish you. And that's the problem I have with a lot of these safe spaces. I noticed that, especially within LGBT safe spaces. If you don't agree with everything that a lot of the queer and trans people are saying, then you're kicked out. This is why LGBT Alliance, places like LGBT Alliance and a lot of other more radical feminist spaces are actually being made. It's because a lot of these LGBT spaces are more focusing on the bunch of gender stuff that's going on. rather than actually helping same-sex attracted people to understand their attractions. This is why I, as a 22-year-old lesbian, feel a lot more comfortable going into LGBT Alliance than any other LGBT organization, because they take more like non-binary voices and like drag queens and non-binary voices, things I literally cannot relate to, and they would say, these are the voices of the LGBT community, these queer women. I'm not a queer woman, I am a lesbian. Get that right, okay? Get it right, or don't get it at all. That's it. That's how I feel. I don't care what you think of me when I say this, but I could care less about your trans issues. I care about them enough to say that sucks and this shouldn't be happening, but you don't need to talk about them and talk over me. Especially don't talk over like trans men, because it's always trans women. Trans women this, trans women this. First of all, you also have to know that trans women are not the only trans people in the community. It's trans men as well. And you're willing to talk about you're not willing to talk about their issues. It's always about trans women. Sure. But then it's always the people that seem to be like non-binary. Like, they'll be happy to walk in with mustaches and long hair and nail polish talking about some, I'm non-binary, I'm trans femme, I'm non-binary, and you get mad when people misgender you. I'm sorry, not to be rude, not to be transphobic, but seriously, even trans women believe in this. Like, even most, like, passing trans women, they would say, you need to work on passing more. Sorry, not sorry. Why? Why would you sit there like that? And as for trans men, yeah, you can be feminine. No one's saying that men can't be feminine. What we're saying is that if you have your boobs out, if you're spreading your legs, putting your boobies out, and wearing thongs, posting about how much of a girly boy you are, some people are going to take that as you're not actually trans. And half the time, some of these people are actually not trans men. They're the queerifying the trans male space. A lot of times, they're happy with their boobs. These trans men are happy with these little trans masculine men are happy with their boobs. Instead of, thinking they want to have top surgery, wanting to be on testosterone, wanting to talk about the issues that trans men actually face with taking testosterone, the levels of their libido going up rapidly because they are facing a male puberty. And there are issues that trans women face, such as trying to get their voice feminine. Even with a deep voice, you can still sound feminine. Like, I know some trans women that sound very similar to me, and I have a deep female-born voice. You can sound like this. You can have softer features, trying to learn how to do the makeup, natural makeup, or even looking all natural and making sure that they are looking feminine. They don't want to be harassed. Like, there's issues you need to talk about in your space. But when you come into a women's space, when you come into these actually safe spaces for women, and you try to overrun it, that's the problem. People overrun it. These people, they don't understand those issues that other women face. We, as other women, we face. We get othered. They're the talking stick. They have all the talking power. They have the talking stick. We need to shut up. And in autism spaces, we get people who are self-diagnosed, or the people that claim to have been diagnosed later in their lives. I understand that technology has not come, the science was not there back in the day when you were young and growing up, and you never really got to have a proper autism diagnosis or anything like that until you were in your 20s or 30s or 40s. That happens. That genuinely happens. But there's more and more of these people saying that they're getting autism diagnoses now, and they're self-diagnosing as well. I don't believe in that self-diagnosis stuff. I'm sorry. I don't care if I seem like I'm gatekeeping anybody. Self-discovery and self-advocacy is not the same as self-diagnosing. basically giving yourself all these mental problems that is actually inhibiting yourself. Self-advocacy is being like, oh, I think I may have these things. I'm going to go get checked out. I'm going to go to the doctor. I'm going to go to a psychiatric unit. I'm going to a psychologist, and I'm going to be getting the tests run on me. Self-diagnosing is just putting all that shit on your Instagram bio, talking about we have these similar experiences. And I'm sitting here who's been diagnosed since I was very young, and being harassed about it, being bullied about it, being excluded from jobs about it, sitting there letting these self-diagnosed people get into whatever the hell they want, running over my spaces. It's not something I want to it's not something I tolerate at all. And so don't even mention me talking about fandom safe spaces, because a lot of fandoms have this as well. I notice this in fandom, especially with like really popular fandoms like Animal Crossing. The Animal Crossing safe spaces are some of the most toxic. They don't like anything that even permeates their little bubble. And if it does, they try to send hate and death threats to it. It's the same with Genshin Impact, the same with even the Sonic fandom. I have been a Sonic fan since I was a very young child. Since I was about 3 or 4 years old, I've been a Sonic fan. I played on my cousin's Genesis, played Sonic the Hedgehog 2. Okay, I've done that. I have plenty of Sonic game experience. I even played Sonic Mania for hours, and I'm replaying it on PC on Steam. It is the most fun I've ever had. Okay, I am a Sonic fan. You see this hair? I look like Sonic now. But the Sonic fan base has this safe space area where, like, you can talk about your issues. You can be trans inclusive. It is LGBTQIA plus inclusive. I don't give a fuck if it's a group about a freaking hedgehog. A blue, speedy hedgehog. Why do I care about all of your sexualities and gender identities and pronouns? If it's a safe space to talk about Sonic, then just talk about the games and being excited about it. Yes, people are going to have personal experiences with it. You can that's probably one of the only reasons you should bring up, if it has something to do with your gender and your sexuality or something like that, that's when you bring it up. But honestly, I really don't see a reason to bring it up. For the me community, I've only done it like a couple times. Like once or twice, saying, yes, the me's have helped me out figuring out like social skills, and a couple of CPU me's have helped me figure out my sexuality, helped me be like more comfortable with lesbianism. And that's really it. Don't make it your entire life. Don't make that like the big focus of it, because that's the focus of these safe spaces. It's always the identities, micro-analyzing and hyper-analyzing, hyper-labeling, and just looking through a microscopic view of these identities rather than seeing the individual. It's always about the group. And I am pro-individual, rejecting the idea that it's only the groups that should be judged. And that is my biggest reason I'm against safe spaces. If it's truly a safe space, you would be okay with the individual who is a part of that group expressing dissenting opinions, saying that they genuinely don't care, they want to be supportive to everybody. Living in a truly colorblind society, talking about race, being genuine about treating people correctly with their character and not their skin color or their sexuality or their gender identity or their disability, just being kind to everybody. But apparently in these safe spaces, that's not allowed. Diversity of thought is banned, and you should just accept the hate if you decide to believe in, quite frankly, classical liberal values.
Thank you so much for playing my game.